Okay.
You.
Somebody's trying to connect down the bottom there.
I would suggest from the ceiling it might be Rabina.
Okay. Okay, well, welcome everybody to our full town council meeting for the 25th of January, Burns night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So have we got anybody in the public session that is waiting to speak? Or
No.
no? Okay. Okay, so we haven't got anyone in public session. We can, oh, there she is. Okay, so we can move on to item 1, any apologies for absence.
Only apologies from County Councillor Tim Mills.
Okay, thank you. And item 2, any declarations of interest? None. Okay, item 3, to receive the minutes of the full council meeting held on the 23rd of November. Everybody got those?
Yeah.
Is there any queries on those ones? No. Okay. We should move on to item 4, the interim minutes. The interim on the 21st of December. Has anybody got any queries on those interim minutes? Nope. Okay. So item 5, we have the minutes of the planning committee.
Thank you, Mayor. In the absence of Lisa as Vice Chairman, I present the Planning Committee minutes for 30th of November and 21st of December. No recommendations.
Thank you. And item 6, the Town Centre and Events Committee minutes.
I'm pleased to present the Town Centre and Events Committee meeting and any questions willing to take. Thank you.
Anybody got any questions on those? No. Okay. Item 7, the Environment Committee.
I present the Environment Committee minutes of 14th of December. There is a recommendation, but it's already been agreed at the interim meeting to do with the bridge repairs.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you.
And we shall move on to item 8, the Resources Committee.
Yeah, I'm happy to present the draft minutes of the Resources Committee meeting held on the 4th of January. There are no recommendations.
Everybody happy with those?
Agreed.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay. So she'll move on to item 9, the Diversity and Inclusion Working Group. We have receive interim recommendations from there. Are you doing that, Paul, or is muted?
Yeah, just to highlight to members, this is an interim report. So originally the group was hoping to provide recommendations before now in full, but because meetings were delayed and they've only met twice in recent months, they've prepared the 2 interim recommendations given, and they're anticipating bringing further recommendations when they've had further conversations later in the year, hopefully before the election. So these 2 recommendations are that the council reviews its current equality and diversity policy, and that the town council considers appointing a member of staff to be the officer lead for equalities and diversity, neither of which have any financial impact on the council.
Okay, thank you for that. And thank you for the workshop committee for presenting those findings. Anybody got any questions on those? Councillor Stutchbury?
Just to propose that we should agree the recommendations. There's nothing contentious in the recommendations. They're just an internal management matter and a matter of good policy, which we were working towards in any case. So I propose we agree them.
Thank you. Okay, thanks, Ruth. And Councillor Smith? Councillor Smith? Yes? Hello, Mike. Come in. Is he muted or is he not?
He's not speaking.
He's not
Still there.
speaking. Councillor Smith, you've got your hand up. You can speak.
You were very quiet then for a while. I wasn't aware of what you were saying. I'm not quite up on the lip reading as I might be. I just wondered how these are going to be taken forward, which committees, etc., etc. I guess resources are going to be involved at some stage or the other.
I'd assume they would both be within resources remit.
So can they be on the next agenda then, please?
Okay.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Anyone else got anything on that? No? Okay. So thank you very much for those items, and we'll look forward to the full report when that comes. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to item 10 to receive and requesting any reports from the Buckinghamshire Council councillors. Who's first on that? Councillor Stutchbury?
Well, firstly, thank you. Obviously, you'll know that there's been budget scrutiny going on over a number of weeks, which our group have been scrutinising and working on that budget. You'll also know that since we last met, there's been a children's and education select committee meeting where we looked at various aspects. There's also been a planning meeting. We've also had numerous group meetings or section meetings of the Buckingham Community Board on the environment and youth, and many of them aspects will come back. The stuff from the environment will come back to Environment Committee, and the stuff from the youth will come back to events. I gave apologies for Councillor Donoghue, obviously at the youth side of it, because she was representing us. I'm also minded to the fact that though disappointed the community board didn't take up the suggestion to fund the support scheme for the free parking for people with the injection, yet seem to have gone on with an additional scheme to provide people in a minibus. That in itself is what has been decided, though it was disappointing, and there's been no explanation given, I've been given, as to why the Swan practice were advised that the scheme was going to go ahead. I picked that up myself. I saw it on social media and contacted the officer concerned immediately to ask her if this was correct, because I was quite pleased that the funding had been agreed, only to find out that it hadn't been agreed. And the officer then sought about contacting the Swan practice to take that down. And then, of course, it appeared in the front of the paper. What was quite grueling was on Saturday, there was people stopping in their cars and asking where the free parking was, because they bought the local paper of that generation and they erroneously believed it was going to be funded. So quite how the Swan practice were informed, I don't know, but I don't think it was a good day for anyone, least of all those people who wanted to park free. I did write to the other members saying that I thought it was a good idea. There was a letter posted on social media, which I read, which I didn't see before it was on social media. And we are where we are. But what I will say is thank you for the Community Centre Management Committee for the work you've done supporting the residents. I have to say, stunning effort on your part, and all, hands up, and thank you very much for that, stepping in and doing it. And I know you've been waiting to do it for a long time, and well done, the Community Centre Management Committee, for supporting the community in what you've been doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. Councillor Cole?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury, for raising that. I too want to raise the contentious issue of parking charges for patients attending the vaccination clinic at Buckingham Community Centre. Residents in my Buckingham North Ward are not using too strong a word when they say they are outraged that the elderly and vulnerable are being made to pay for this life-saving vaccine. I too am dismayed by Buckinghamshire Council's refusal to suspend parking charges for the over 70s attending the clinic. It's morally indefensible for Buckinghamshire Council to profit from a pandemic emergency by making them, many of whom have not left their homes for weeks, pay if unable to walk to the clinic. Asking them to use parking meters for which human contact is required adds to the risk of spreading the virus. Council leader Martin Tett said that Buckinghamshire Council could not afford to provide free parking, but we're talking about 10 spaces throughout the day, which would be supervised by volunteer marshals. And Public Health Cabinet member, Councillor Gareth Williams, posted a long list of legal reasons why it could not, ignoring the fact that NHS staff and volunteers at the clinic have been offered free parking. And not every election polling day, there's free parking throughout the town. It might be noted that Buckingham Community Centre has taken a big hit. They're offering the hall at a discount, a third of their normal booking. That should be noted. There was much misinformation spread about free parking last week, as Councillor Stutchbury said, firstly by the Swan practice themselves and by the advertiser. So where did they get that information from? And I note from Buckingham What Matters website that Councillor Cllr had tried to use the community board funding to subsidise free parking, and when that was unsuccessful, he bid to fund the BART bus service to get vulnerable to the clinic. May I ask him how either could have been affected without reference to the community board, on which I and Buckingham Town Council's elected representative? So I call on Buckinghamshire Council to immediately suspend parking charges for bays supervised by volunteer marshals. Otherwise, we are looking at a travesty.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Does anyone else? Sorry, Councillor Harvey? You're muted, John.
Yeah, I know. I just got myself unmuted.
That's all right.
I can't add much to what Councillor Cole and Councillor Stutchbury have just said. I would just say that on my daily exercise walk this morning, I had a quick chat with a couple of the volunteers outside the community centre, and they've said they've seen quite a few, I don't know what numbers obviously, but certainly quite a few of older people, often those who perhaps don't use the car park very often, struggling back and forth to use the machine, which now of course now requires you to put in your number plate. And a lot of people don't remember their number plate. And sort of go back and forth to try and remember what it is and get back to the machine. And if they're like anything like me, and I'm a lot younger, well, not a lot younger, but a bit younger, I'll have forgotten it by the time I go back to the machine. It isn't just the money, it's the sheer inconvenience of people who are already stressed. One, because they're outside, perhaps for the first time in months. And I know that from talking to somebody, certainly one or two people in that situation, probably many, many more. And secondly, they're already thinking a lot about getting the vaccination. They're already quite upset and stressed and probably very happy, but nonetheless a bit stressed about this. And then to pile on that with the requirement that they have to kind of put money in this machine, two of which are not working, are out of order. The third one, I was told, the third one is not working very well, even though it says it's working. On what planet is this a good idea for the members of our community who are doing their public health duty for themselves, obviously, but for all of us to get vaccinated against this deadly disease? I think it's absolutely scandalous that Buckinghamshire Council could not find a way to make this happen. All it would have taken, as I think has been pointed out to them by members of the Rotary Club, is to have maybe cordoned off a few spaces and just said to the parking official, don't bother going there. Now, that's not difficult to do. It's pragmatic common sense which we've been exhorted to use countless times by this government. But was it failing from Buckinghamshire Council? Yes, it would appear to have been done so. And as a result, all these people for the next few weeks are going to have to struggle with these machines. And I hate these machines. Why don't they kind of QWERTY keyboards? I do not know. And they are putting a lot of people under unnecessary stress. And I think it's appalling.
Thank you, John. Councillor Mahi.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I want to support Councillor Cole and Councillor Harvey, and I totally agree. The machines are not working. I saw people with walking aids going from one machine which was faulty and then having to walk all the way to the machine that was working. It is totally unfair. And then to the distance to the community centre. I think Buckinghamshire Council should be ashamed of themselves.
Thank you. Councillor String-Clark. Hi, Christine, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm just trying to.
That's all right.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, and also because I believe, of course, I haven't been out since last March, but I believe you also have to, you know, put your registration number into those buttons. You know, this is an excellent way of people spreading germs, isn't it? I just thought, you know, for people who've been keeping themselves safe for months, you're expecting them to press these buttons that every member of the public is pressing.
Yeah.
It's just daft, you know, unless people have been told, please bring gloves with you.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Yes, totally agree with everything that else has been said. But I want to talk for a moment about the response that we had from the Unitary Authority, which, if I read it right, said if they suspend charges here in Buckingham, they've got to do it everywhere else as well. Well, that is absolute rubbish, I'm sure, because I've seen bays in our car park suspended for work people's vehicles. The ones along by the building site, they were suspended for a while. I've seen them suspended at the other end when there's work been going on. And as others have said, it's just a simple matter of coning off a couple of bays so that people can pull in, park, go and have their jab, come out half hour afterwards or whatever it is and go. So I totally agree that this is a very shabby way of dealing with it. And the point that Martin Tett made about saying, well, everywhere else that they're charging for it, that's irrelevant. You know, as far as we're concerned, they should be free of charge for the vaccination. And yes, I'm fully in support of taking whatever action is necessary to free up some of those spaces.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I did contact Martin Tett 3 times and say to him, it wasn't the whole car park we were asking for. We were just asking for those 10 spaces on the left-hand side as you go in to be used as vaccination spaces. But he keeps replying that it's the whole car park and you can't cordon off a bit of it. And as you say, he says he would have to do it for every other one in the county. But there you go. Councillor Stutchbury.
Just to, I totally understand and concur with the concerns expressed. I did write to Martin Tett long before the discussion on social media, and it may have just started on the subject and got a response back. I chose not to publish that response on a public outlet because it was a confidential email to me. But the expression was not, I don't think the understanding was there. And at the time, I didn't think to make it an issue because I hoped that good reason and good sense would prevail. And by acting in a political way, I thought that may prevent good sense and good sense prevailing. Unfortunately, it wasn't the case. Where we go from now, I don't know. It is Buckinghamshire Council's car park. There was an effort from the community board to, allegedly an effort from the community board to fund it. I did personally say I thought it in correspondence was the right way to go. That was at the stage that I'd seen the social media and said that there's a great outcry from the public. There was commentary on it. That's a private correspondence. I won't go into that, but it's not a great day. And I think it needs explanation. What I'm still unclear about and deeply unclear about is what the communication was with the Swan practice, because it would have been so much better for people if that hadn't happened, because what it's ended up doing is people are more worried and more frightened now because they get there thinking they're going to do one thing. Thankfully, when they get to the community centre, as I said earlier, thanks to the good work of the community centre management committee and the staff in there, they got a nice welcome. But you don't need that when you come out, and I'm sure if good sense had prevailed, those reasons given in the correspondence published on Facebook, not circulated to the members of the Buckinghamshire Community Board, would have been better received or understood. I can't work it out really, because during the COVID virus pandemic, the last one, the car park was shut and there was bags over them, and it's just not a good day round, is it? It's not a good day and doesn't give you a feeling. And I didn't enjoy listening to the actual people who were volunteering on Saturday being asked the questions, and it's so embarrassing for them as they're doing a good job supporting Rotary and whatever, and they're having to answer questions for not elected officials, because you are elected Buckingham Town Councillors. Funny enough, the people who made the decision haven't been elected to the council they represent. It's a curious one, that one, isn't it? But anyway, I'd be interested if any other members of the Buckinghamshire Council got a better explanation of it than I've got, because I've got no explanation. It puts my mind at rest.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey?
Yeah, just to build on what Councillor Suchby just said there, I mean, I think it's made the Swan practice embarrasses them, has made them look silly, and it's made the local newspaper that already struggles look a bit silly as well, because presumably they have to publish some sort of retraction next week, although they put the story in, I'm sure in good faith, that this was the accurate thing to do. It's also meant that people having read the paper, I remember the generation that are getting vaccinated are people who tend to read the paper rather than social media, not exclusively, but probably a lot of them. There probably is an older readership. They'll have come along expecting free parking, then to be told by a volunteer that, I'm sorry, no, it's not possible. That volunteer then is both embarrassed and possibly then subject to abuse from people who thought they were going to be getting it for free without any sort of hassle. It's just been a complete calamity, a complete muddle, a complete, whatever. And just to make the point, when I asked the question on social media, should the council provide free parking for those attending, those who voted no was 46 people. Those who voted yes, 856 people. That's nearly 20 to 1 in favour of providing free parking to those who are coming for their vaccinations. What on earth are Buckinghamshire Council thinking? Where's the representation? Where's democracy? Where's accountability here?
Thank you, John. I think, Charlie, you had your hand up just now. He's muted.
Yeah. Mayor, I'm conscious that it will be my turn to speak, and I shouldn't be talking at this point. I just wonder whether now is the time to move on to the next councillor's report, so that we're in an odd situation where lots of questions have been asked for me to answer, but it's not actually yet my turn.
Okay, that's fine. We'll take Councillor Mordew first, and then we can move on to that.
Right. I've been volunteering down there on the car parking. I've done 3 sessions so far, and people were quite happy to pay the 50p to enable them to park. The fact they have to put in the registration number is a problem, but there were Rotarians that by the parking meter that could help. I had to pay 50p when I drove down there, but I can afford it. And I think it's regrettable because I asked separately, Gareth is not responsible for the car parks, he's responsible for communities. I had a series of emails separate to anything that was done with him, trying to get 10 spaces allocated. And unfortunately, I was unable to get that. And I come to it more from, as we say, a safety point of view than from the monetary point of view. And but a lot of the people there, yes, they were over 80, but there were equally a lot of people who were under 80, under 70, who were having vaccinations because they were vulnerable. So I think they could have allocated 10 spaces. I was given the legal reason as to why they couldn't, which I accept because that is the official point of view. Whether I agree with it or not is another thing, and I don't agree with it because I think the spaces could have been allocated.
Thank you. Okay.
So it's Charlie and Warren for their reports still.
Yeah. So, Charlie, do you want to give your report first, or
I think that might be appropriate,
Yeah.
given the last 15 or so minutes. It's difficult to know where to start. I suppose, let me start with, I share the frustrations I've just heard. I wouldn't have been fighting so hard to try and solve this problem if I didn't think it was important, that I didn't care about it. If I wasn't frustrated myself that what was a seemingly benign and incredibly helpful request to give 10 spaces near to the hall so that people could have them free parking for the vaccination centre wasn't as simple as I at first thought it would be, and of course everyone assumes it should be. The truth is that I have, and with others, with Warren and other councillors, local councillors, Howard, as he's mentioned, have been engaged in this within the council for well over a week. We thought we'd found a solution. I should call it a workaround. It probably wasn't an ideal solution, but it would have solved the problem. The truth is that that solution, the door was shut on that at the very last minute, because it was probably inappropriate for the community board to be funding something that was not council policy. And much as I had hoped it would sneak through, it didn't. And that was disappointing. There have been a few specific questions, and I think, you know, a lot of you have read the official answers that have been posted. They're posted on my Facebook, they're posted on Buckingham What Matters for You, the official reasons, the legal reasons. But in short, they come down to, legally, they couldn't siphon off free parking for just some of the car park, because that creates problems when there are parking tickets issued. So it's a legal issue, which means that they don't want to do that. And secondly, that we are part of Buckinghamshire Council. It's a council car park, and it was felt that to provide an exception here would mean an exception for fairness across the county. And so what's a small cost here, and you know, for us to have had that whole car park for the period that it should take to vaccinate the over 80s, which is the period that we might have been able to help for, was not astronomical. But unfortunately, across the county, with much bigger car parks in play, it was a very big cost at a time when the council is spending a huge amount of money to try and look after our most vulnerable at the worst possible time that we've had. And you won't be surprised that every institution at the moment, I'm sure town council will know too, has been spending as much money as it possibly can to help the vulnerable and to get through COVID and to support businesses and to try and do everything that we can at the worst possible time that, you know, that we'll have had in many of our lifetimes, and I hope for the rest of our lifetimes. So it was disappointing and frustrating. A couple of specific things that come out of this. Councillor Cole, and I hope you noticed the title there, but I'm in your committee and I will play by your games rules. You mentioned, how was this signed off by the community board? Well, without you being involved. And the short answer to that is there is a COVID quick response fund that was agreed by all of us that allows us to give small amounts of money quickly when needed. We've been using it to fund food banks, to support young carers, to get money into school for schools, actually not schools, that came from elsewhere, but it's money that we've been using for quick funding processes. And so that needs 3 councillors to give it permission so that it can happen quickly, and that's how that was funded. I was asked, someone said this decision was made by people who weren't being elected. I don't agree with that. I think, Robin, you mentioned that. I'm not aware of it being the people who made the decision that this couldn't happen. I'm very aware who they are, and they're very much elected. So that's unfortunate. And and as as a council, we have shared responsibility for that. Councillor Harvey pointed out there's a huge amount of local support for it. Absolutely, local support I share. And it's not the first time, and I'm afraid may not be the last time, when something that is absolutely right for a local community, and this is why I hope the community board to solve the problem, doesn't plan out across a wider geography. We have it nationally all the time. We have it across councils elsewhere. It's hugely frustrating. And it's a shame that we couldn't have move forward. I suspect most of my questions are going to remain on parking. So rather than talk about other things, other than to add thank you for the Buckingham Town Council for helping with the funding that Dean Jones raised for flooding. That was an incredibly great solution. So thank you for supporting that. And that, along with community board funding for flood victims, is getting out to people. So that's brilliant. And obviously I'm delighted that the vaccination centre is up and running. It seems to be running smoothly. I'll just add, I was aware from the very first day that there's issues with a machine that has been reported. I've put the strongest possible force behind getting that fixed as soon as possible. But let me answer your further questions on the parking. Oh, and I haven't answered, so you can ask me again. About the bad press releases.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mahi.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I find your argument about not giving 10 spaces flawed in the fact that if other towns also would then have to have 10 spaces, yes, that's fine. If they are parking where there's going to be vaccination, they can give them free parking in those towns. But if they're nowhere near a vaccination center, then why should they get free parking? And it will put Buckinghamshire Council in a good light if they had given these spaces free, not to our town, to other towns where they had a vaccination center nearby. But they missed that chance. And now what's happened is it's given people a bad feeling and given Buckinghamshire Council a bad reputation for being mean to the people who support them through their taxes.
Councillor Mahi, so just to clarify, it's not that the 10 spaces would have to be replicated, it's that legally we can only issue free parking across a car park. So it would have been the whole of Cornwall Meadows that had to be free. And this is one of the legal arguments that has been clearly made, and then that would have to be rolled out to the other car parks. I totally agree with your frustration. I've worked hard to try and avoid this. I've not been able to achieve it, but I've worked hard to try and achieve it because I agree. It seems ridiculous that we couldn't have given 10 spaces or even 20 spaces. But the legal reasons, the legal position has been clearly put into the public domain, I can't. I'm not going to take them to court, unfortunately, over it, but they're legal reasons.
Okay, can I just ask Warren if that's your logo thingy or is it your hand up there? No,
I'm just waiting for when it's my turn.
I wasn't sure whether that was your something you were holding or whether it was actually your hand up.
No, my broadband wasn't very good for the first half hour, so I had my camera off.
Okay, we'll take Councillor Stutchbury first and then Warren.
Well, firstly, thank you, Charlie, for coming tonight and giving your explanation of what took place. There's two questions I really think come out of this is who notified the Swan practice that it was going to take place, because they must have felt, whoever notified them, that it was someone with enough authority to be able to go onto social media and do it. And my second point is you alluded to Councillor Cole by saying I'm here and I'll obey by your rules, and he has and I recognise you as a councillor here. That's a rude point that you've just raised. If you were to study the Buckinghamshire Council's parish charter on item 4, representation, the council in its charter, proposed charter's consultation, states how it values town and parish councils. So I value town and parish councils and how it wants to work with them locally and so on. Well, it names them in the charter. It's probably about time we recognise them at the community board. That's a slightly off piece to what you're receiving today. And I wasn't going to say it, but it was your response to Councillor Mark Cole, who you know has questioned you. He's also a magistrate. He's got a magistrate title, which isn't recognised. And I would never have a magistrate title. I've never done that much public service as he has. And I think that needs recognising. But the first question was, do you know, and is it possible to know who communicated it to the Swan practice? Because over and above all the politics of it, that's the thing which has caused the most confusion, hurt and upset, because the decision of the council would have been fine. It was the publicity which caused it. And as you published the cabinet members' email on social media, I'm questioning whether I should publish the email that I was sent from the leader of the council, Martin Tett, when I asked him kindly, and I said I hadn't canvassed support on that. I wanted to see what his feeling was, but I didn't choose to publish that letter because at that point I didn't think it was going to be helpful. So if you can answer those things, I'd be grateful. And if you don't know, please try and find out who it was, because it's not helped you. It's not helped the community board, and it definitely hasn't helped Buckinghamshire Council in its communications and working together in Buckingham.
So a few points. We are going to be talking about councillor logos and the community board later. I am using politely the councillor logo, Councillor Stutchbury, here today. And I apologise if my little in-joke with Mark caused offence, but I wasn't being rude because I was using the Councillor Cole abbreviation as the Buckingham Town Council asks. The Buckingham Community Board does have a different set of rules, and we can talk about those later. To answer the question, yeah, I think I do know the name of who was doing their job to release the information in advance so that people could know what was happening. And it was, it was part of the press and officer work that goes on supporting the community board. Unfortunately, this was funding that had been agreed and then was cancelled at the very last minute. And although Swan Practice was phoned and made aware that there had been a change and it had been cancelled, somehow Swan Practice was still posted that. So whether that was because different people were spoken to and that message hadn't get through within the Swan Practice, I don't know. I'm not sure. What I absolutely don't know is how it got into Buckingham Advertiser. I suspect that that was because someone was trying to be very helpful at the time, had seen that it was had been released, because it was released on social media too. So there was a general release that was in error. Social media by the Swan Practice. So I suspect that was then forwarded to the Buckingham Advertiser, and we weren't aware of that. So when we were calling round to insist that people didn't continue with that press, like we phoned the Swan to cancel it, we weren't aware that someone had got in contact with the Buckingham Advertiser. So I'd like to say your guess is as good as mine how it got into the Buckingham Advertiser.
Well, can I just say, Charlie, as I said earlier in my deliberations, I spotted it on social media and I knew it was incorrect. I spoke to the community board officer, and we don't use names of officers in meetings, and she knew absolutely nothing about it being posted on there, and she was horrified and alarmed because she knew the upset it was going to cause. So let's not point fingers there, because we know it wasn't her, because she didn't know anything about it till I told her. and she reacted properly, and she contacted Swan Practice immediately.
She did indeed.
So she acted properly. So let's never in any way put any blame there. But it hasn't been a great day. And when I made the quirk about unelected, I was being, we are elected in the councils we previously come from, but sadly, as you well know, none of us have had the opportunity to be elected in the council we're serving, which is a truism. It was a throwaway remark, but it is a truism, as you will probably recognise yourself. But thank you for your explanation. I look forward to finding out who it is in due course, because I think that's probably, I have, since these episodes, wrote to the Richard Ambrose, because I sit on the audit committee, and I'm advising him that we need to look at these matters of governance and audit in the way we do these things going forward. It wasn't to comment on this account. In fact, that email went off before this episode, but I think it's more prevalent because you and I and as fellow councillors are spending public money, and you're quite right in what you said about the Action Fund. You're quite right that it was agreed for emergency funding, and you've been quite accurate about that. I'm just sorry that we're not in a place we want to be, are we, Charlie? We wouldn't want to be here.
No,
love the money.
And as I was saying, that piece of information going was everyone doing their right job. There is no blame. It's just, unfortunately, because there was a last-minute change of plan, that message clearly didn't get through. And again, there hasn't been an inquiry into this. I don't know 100%. But all I'm trying to do is say there's no skullduggery there that I'm aware of, and I'm certainly not looking for any. But it was, having already been annoyed that the funding wasn't happening, it was obviously not good news to hear that it had gone public that it had.
Thank you.
Wouldn't be surprised to know that occasionally I swear. That was one of those moments.
I've tried to stop swearing in case I start to enjoy swearing, so I try not to swear at all now.
Anyway, Robin, you're having all the fun, and others have their hand up. So
I always have all the fun, Charlie. You provide it.
Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, I've just been doing a bit of searching, and this is a piece from the Coventry newspaper. It says free parking zones have been set up for those having COVID-19 jabs in Nuneaton and Bedworth. To stop people being left out of pocket, the council has set up free parking bays in both town centres. So can I suggest that the Buckinghamshire legal advisors contact the Nuneaton and Bedworth legal advisors to find out how they've managed to do it in Nuneaton and Bedworth, but Buckinghamshire Council feel unable to do it in our county?
So, John, as you know, if the car park had been part of AVDC, this wouldn't have been a county-wide issue. And so there will be free parking elsewhere in the world. But different car parks are owned by different people and different councils. So I wouldn't want to say that the legal advice that has been shared online is in any way faulted by that, because there are different owners of car parks.
These are council-owned car parks by Nuneaton and Bedworth Council. They're a council that owns and runs car parks. They have decided to set aside some parking zones.
A district or a county council?
I don't know. I don't think that makes a difference, though, does it?
Well, all I'm saying is that if this had been under a district council, and I'm not arguing that this would have been a better thing, I'm getting dangerous territory here, but the problem is that this was you could have a decision over a small area. So for example, if you owned Buckingham, that car park as Buckingham Town Council, you could make that decision without it being influencing car parks across Buckinghamshire. But as Buckinghamshire Council, that's where we weren't able to do that. So yes, others will be able to make decisions because they will be different sized councils with different areas, geographical areas. Good.
Okay, thank you. Shall we move on to Warren for your report?
Thank you very much. You spent a lot of time on car parking, so I won't have my say, apart from to say that Charlie and I worked very hard to do what we thought was right, and it was unfortunate that the rug was pulled from under us right at the last minute, and we share everyone's frustrations about that. However, let's not forget that we do have free parking next to the community centre and through the town centre. It's only the off-street car parking that's the 50p. And also we did arrange for NHS staff to have free parking as well. So we did win some, but unfortunately not everything. And given how late you are already, and you've got a fairly full agenda tonight, and I suppose the only key thing I really wanted to mention in my report was an update on the flooding situation. Just to say that I've had some productive meetings with the strategic flood team at the council, and also with the flood manager for the Environment Agency that covers the River Great Ouse catchment. I think it's clear that the EA knows that they didn't call the flood warning at the right time, and there will certainly be some questions to be asked about why the Buckingham gauge was ignored during the depths of the flood, particularly as many residents and myself phoned in on the spot readings, explaining our concerns early in the afternoon and the evening. I'm pleased to say that the EA and strategic flood team are coming to the next community board to get an update on that. I'm also pleased that the town council has put a call for volunteers for hopefully a rejuvenated flood group, and I think there's some really some lessons to be learned on how we can better react to future flood events. I'm also pleased to say that following my request at Cabinet a few days ago, that the council has assured me that they will undertake what's called a Section 19 review, which is a formal investigation into the flood event. We've had a couple of those in the past over the years, but we ticked quite a number of the trigger points to have a Section 19 review. These do take a while to undertake, unfortunately, but I think it's worth doing properly, and to properly review the number of houses and businesses that were flooded, and it's worth keeping the pressure on that progresses as speedily as possible. I'm also pleased to say that the upper catchment natural flood alleviation programme is still progressing, and I'm hoping I can work with my fellow colleagues in the upper catchment area that we can get some progress during 2021 to deliver some actual physical interventions on the ground. And this will be based on the pilot we did last year in the River Leck, just upstream of Leckhampstead. So I think some interesting things that we can carry on this year. I think it's probably all I really need to report tonight, given how late it is.
Thank you, Warren. Councillor Stutchbury.
Firstly, thank you, Warren, for the work you're doing on the flooding. It crosses over a bit into your responsibility as a cabinet member, and I'm really wary of how this is all going to go forward. And as we travel around, we really need to, I think you would agree, is not allow to what happened in 2007, when many of the findings of 2007 in reports and things I've read going around Buckinghamshire, North Buckinghamshire, still need to be taken forward. But also at the same cabinet meeting, when you asked for the Section 19, we raised the question of another matter to do with flooding at the meeting. That was the taking forward looking at the long-term flooding in the area. That was the 2011 study that was took forward. But can I ask, being as you're now in contact with the EA in such a strong and determined way, which I don't doubt, have they ever given you a sign of where you've got their ear of when we'll find out who was responsible for the pollution and whether there was any regress on that? Because I'm sure it irritates you as much as it irritates me, that thing. And I know it's out of what you said about flooding, but I thought that knowing you'd probably be pushing for that answer, irrespective of me asking you whether you're pushing for that answer.
Your last question first. Unfortunately, there's still no official news from the EA. I understand there were there was a formal investigation taken last year, but we're then in the hands of potentially the courts, I think. But I need to find out what the latest is, because over recent weeks that's not been top of my mind, I'm afraid. So
it was pushed upon me when I was stood looking at the flood. The comments were made, oh well, the town's flooded, they made a error there and they didn't do anything about that. You know, when you're being harangued, Warren, people generally dissatisfied, and that came out. And I think we owe the community the explanation when it's available, don't we?
Indeed. In terms of your first question about the 2007 flood, I think what was quite interesting is that long-term residents of Buckingham had definitely learned the lessons of that terrible flood and had made property level changes to their homes. So I know, talking to residents in Chandos Road, where their back basement kitchens can get flooded, a lot of them had made really sensible precautions as recommended by the National Flood Forum and the Environment Agency, such as hard floors, raised plug sockets and all the rest of it. So whilst they did sadly get flooded again, the cleanup was extremely easy for them because their house was what we call resilient. What I think was quite interesting, and this will be really important in terms of a rejuvenated flood group, are people who move into a house who perhaps haven't read their solicitor's reports as carefully as they could have, or their tenants are not told about the property's location in a flood zone, or building owners who don't service their flood protection equipment, be it one-way valves or flood barriers and that sort of thing. So there's an awful lot of work, I think, for us to do to maintain awareness that does die down over a period of time. And certainly I talked to a few newer residents who were perhaps shocked at the level of flooding, even though it was very similar to 2007. That knowledge just hadn't been passed on. So I think that's probably going to be job one really during 2021, is how do we ensure communication is regular, and that we share that good practice and what you can do to your house or business to reduce the risks. But yes, it's been very, very difficult for many people. And we've all got to work together to see how we can minimise that in the future.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't think anybody else got a hand up there, no. So we shall move on to item 11, the action list. Do you want to say anything on that, Paul?
No, I think it stands for itself, but happy to answer questions.
Okay, any questions on the action list? No.
Councillor Harvey has a hand.
Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, a couple of questions. One on the item 226/20, which is halfway down the first page, about the crossing near the King's Head. Obviously, it's been removed currently because the road is blocked anyway, and therefore there's no great need, although one has to be careful of wayward articulated lorries going the wrong way. But apart from that, I wanted to get an update from the town clerk if he has any information about installing this sort of temporary, but actually what we know could well become permanent island in the middle that we discussed a couple of meetings ago.
Okay.
So I haven't got a written answer to the question about it. Is it legal as it is? However, my understanding in conversation with officers is that the temporary crossing is legal, but it wouldn't necessarily be legal to make the same thing permanent.
No, that's not what I'm asking. We talked about there being one that you can bolt into place that looks to all intents and purposes like a proper island in the middle of the road. And that was offered as a solution, a longer term solution, rather than one that we cement in. I thought that was being discussed.
No, the option of a permanent one is in an S106 agreement, but what you're describing would effectively be permanent because it'd be bolted in. Yeah,
I thought there was a solution that looked like that. I asked my colleagues, am I inventing this in my own head? I could well be.
No, they did say, because we said that one was not suitable because it kept moving about, that they would put something better in there until a permanent solution was found. You haven't imagined that, John?
Thank you.
Okay, I would inquire again because I wasn't exactly clear what I was asking.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else got anything on that? Councillor Stutchbury?
I'd just like to say, and I think it's important to say, that fortunately we haven't got anything in the red, which is actions which are emergency actions, and those actions from personal accident and things in there, the town clerk has put an appropriate figure against the risk, and these are public, so people can...
Councillor Stutchbury, we're talking about the action list, not the risk assessment at the moment.
Well, it says the risk of the action list, it says on it, but okay, so we'll he has taken those. Oh, I was getting carried away there. I was reading another bit of paper as I was studying. Having paper and digital and having it all at once is quite confusing. But I will say that the public health meeting question on the action list 9/1/2, we have agreed that in some form or another we take forward a public health meeting. Councillor Harvey attended the last HATS meeting to ask questions which had came out of the Environment Committee. But with COVID, we've been unable to answer the motion which was served in 2018. Have we got any way that we can progress that? Because it's not about the doctor's surgery, it's definitely about more than that. And the HASC meeting clearly stated that they felt they'd done enough consultation with Buckingham and the area, and that hadn't actually taken place. And I think we do need a public meeting, if only to give residents opportunity to question the GCC or clinical commissioning group, because there's been suggestions in the paper of radical changes to the way the hospital did. There's been suggestions to do that. I think it's high time that in some form or another, and that's taken. But we haven't got a date or time, and we'll all, if the elections do take place in March, we'll have managed to slip away in May. Sorry, Warren, I see you laughing. In May, well, put it out there, chap. If they do happen in May, we'll slip into Purda in March, and we shouldn't really be discussing those matters in Purda. So, what's your best guess at what we can do? If we can do nothing, that's an honest answer. But we've got it as an action list, and with all the debate and discussion about it, the community need to know where their health services, more so now than ever before, I would imagine.
So the action is down for an update in March. I'm going to try and get something arranged during February, but obviously I haven't tried to in the last few weeks, given all the pressure officers have been under from across the health service dealing with the issues we've already been talking about.
Well, thank you for that response. Can we have an early, if it's a verbal update, not to the Environment Committee on that in a bit more detail? I think it's unfair to pressurise you in a full council meeting to come forward. I'm sure you're doing things on it, but I think the need is there, never more been demonstrated. We've been bypassed. The paperwork that they circulated at the HAS said they've consulted Owsbury, Wickham and different places. To the best of my knowledge, Buckingham hasn't, through COVID and one thing or another, hasn't had the same treatment. And Buckingham's where we all live and where all of us at this meeting represent Buckingham and the area, and we should get our bite of the cherry. Okay. So will you come to the environment with an update on where you believe we are, even if it's only verbal?
Yeah, I'll put that on. I'll put that on the environment agenda. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is that everything on the action list? Yeah. Okay, we shall move on to item 12, which is a motion from Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, early in January, Thames Valley Police put out a questionnaire asking if people agreed to closing more Thames Valley Police counters. The one that would affect us most directly, as we don't have one in Buckingham now, would be the closure of the one at Bicester. Bicester last year hit 33,000 population. Buckingham is 15,000. Our nearest counters are Bicester and Milton Keynes, of course, both of which are 11 miles away and costly to reach by public transport. there are times when people need to get to police counters, whether it's to reclaim lost property, to report assaults which might have happened to them on the road, accidents, etc. Tellingly, about a week after that questionnaire, Commissioner Stansfield put out an appeal for support to raise council tax for the police, despite the fact in September 2020 he was awarded an additional £972,000 by the Home Office for Safer Streets funding, which, although it was largely directed to improving crime patrols in Oxford, Iffley Road, he did say on that that will release police for other duties elsewhere in Thames Valley. He also added that this year's grant is an additional 12.6 million from the government to pay for an additional 179 police officers. In all this rhetoric, and he put 2 pages about this, not once did he mention the possible closure of police counters, which his own office had canvassed everyone on a week before. So I am saying that this council should oppose the closure of more of them. We lost all our local magistrates' courts, Buckingham, Bicester and Aylesbury, and now Thames Valley Police wants to make our guardians of the police even less accessible. Any further cuts to the police service, I feel, are unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I absolutely agree with you there.
I agree and second that motion.
Thank you. Councillor Touchby?
Yeah, I mean, Councillor Morris just seconded the motion, which is, I think we take Councillor Morris seconding the motion. I was happy to second it, but I think Councillor Morris was first. There is some truisms in this and some concerns in this. You presume, if everything's right, Councillor Mr. Stanford, the Chief Constable, whatever his name is not going to be re-standing. So maybe his attention to detail and the fallout of these things is not as ever present as it would be if he was going to be seeking re-election to his post. Also, we had correspondence from the deputy who's running, we ended up receiving it, if you recall, and it wasn't actually correspondence from them, it was correspondence from him of a political nature. That was sending, we have to realise 20,000 police officers were removed. In the short 2 decades in Buckingham, we've lost the magistrate court and we've lost the police station, which has now been redeveloped. And I presume, till corrected, and Councillor Smith will know better than anybody, we haven't got the counter, or lost the counter, or call in place in the old jail. Yet we pay the same council tax, and North Buckinghamshire pays as much as Oxfordshire and everywhere else. And rural crime is a more difficult crime to resolve. So people do need. Not everyone's going to communicate on the web. When people are alarmed and concerned, they need a counter service. They need somewhere to go, even if it's a free telephone or something to get through. But the systems, if you ring up anything with the police, you end up on a line for a long time. And when you get through it, you're told that it doesn't deck out there or something. So I do think you make a good point. And I do think we should stop any more erosion of it. Watston's got, unless it's closed, got a lovely police building in Wadston when you drive through there. I believe that's still going. And Wadston is a community a lot smaller than Buckingham. Unless the wealthy gentleman who owns a lot of Wadston funds that building. But when I go through there, it still seems to be a small police presence there. Buckingham gives the whole of Buckinghamshire its name, and we've got a office up on the industrial estate of which police officers work from. So we're all right. We need to have representation because it reassures the public, and that's it. So thank you for putting this forward.
Thank you. Councillor Mahi, you had your hand up? No? No. Okay. Anybody else wish to speak on that? I wholeheartedly agree. We need to address this, and I think we need a strong letter to them saying that, you know, we strongly oppose this and we absolutely need a counter here in Buckingham. It's unacceptable that we should not have one. Councillor Cole, do you want to say anything more on that?
No.
No. Okay, so can I ask Paul if you will drop something out for us?
Do we need to vote on the motion?
Yeah.
Okay, so everybody in favour of taking that further?
That is unanimous.
Thank you. And there's no one against? No. No abstentions. Okay, thank you. That's the way we will go. Okay. We'll move on to item 13, which is the COVID-19 update.
Thank you, Mayor. So there's no brand new information to members here. This is a standing item at the moment for obvious reasons. Just to remind councillors that the Lace Hill Centre is largely closed except for some contact sessions at the moment. The market is only open for essential goods and doing quite well in that context. Staff are working at home wherever possible. There are people in and out the office slightly during the week, which is now safe with the extra space that we have. And we're continuing to monitor the budget and the situation, which in terms of forecasting what's going to happen for the year, we're having regular discussions each week on what that might look like, but our guesses are as good as yours at the moment, and we'll keep members updated.
Thank you. Councillor Touchby.
Just to say thank you for the town clerk, because he, I'm sure other chairman, he updates you when you ask questions about various things, and because there are things that pop up all the while, and this is an ever-moving piece. Let's all hope for the day we won't need to discuss COVID, only in the historical sense. It would be a nice day, wouldn't it?
It will be. Absolutely. Okay, we shall move on to item 14, the financial risk assessment.
Thank you, Chair. If I can just remind members that
absolutely.
This was discussed and agreed by the Resources Committee, but the whole council does need to be aware and take ownership of the assessment for the council's finances and management.
Okay, Councillor Stuchby has his hand up.
I'll repeat what I said earlier when I was discussing the risk assessment, the action list, because I jumped an item. I thank the town clerk for the risk assessment. It's good to see that he's monitoring the things. There is nothing in the high to red which shows good stewardship, and other elements within there I know he's going to take forward to the appropriate committees. But I think we should record his thanks, and the fact that we put this in the public domain is a good thing.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey?
Just to say, I agree with Robin, and obviously I support, that we should just note this as the full council, and let the town clerk carry on working on it.
Thank you very much. Oh, Councillor Smith has his hand up there.
Thank you, Mayor. I think rather than just note it, I think we need to approve it.
Good point, Mike.
Okay.
As ever.
So everybody in favour of that?
That is unanimous.
Thank you. No against and no abstentions. Okay, we shall move on to item 15, which is the representation at the Buckingham Villagers Community Board. Okay. So it's to review the Town Council's representation at the board in light of Buckinghamshire Council's insistence on not allowing town councillors to be called by the title of councillor. Councillor Cllr.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As the elected councillor representing 15,000 residents of Buckingham on the Buckingham and Villages Community Board, I ask that all councillors, not just Buckinghamshire Council members, be afforded their correct title of councillor in attendance lists and minutes, and are reinstated as board members and not public at those meetings. Not to do so is undemocratic and disrespectful of the town and parish councils, which are properly constituted local authorities for which these boards are convened. I'm increasingly concerned that the democratic role of town and parishes is being further eroded. Buckinghamshire Council, in its wisdom, has already removed voting rights from those members, and I know that since July meeting, we're no longer referred to as committee members, but as public. I hesitate to say that we were misled in presentations by the former Buckinghamshire County Council about our role in community hubs and on community boards under the new Unitary Authority. That's the only conclusion I can reach. Although only last Wednesday, the Town and Parishes Charter update given to the Buckinghamshire Council Select Committee was prefaced right at the start of the introduction, 1.1, the new localities and strategic partnership service have a focus on developing strong links and relationships with town and parish councils as key partners of the new Buckinghamshire Council. So I call on the community boards to act in a more democratic manner and not to treat us as second-class citizens, or I must consider my future on our local board. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Councillor Clare?
Thank you. Interestingly, Councillor Cole, I think I was given the first chance to speak there. But,
Mayor, sorry.
Right, don't worry.
Sorry. Can I just clarify that we're suspending standing orders to allow Councillor Clare to speak at this point?
Okay, sorry, yes.
Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, no, thank you, Paul. So there are several issues that Mark has just eloquently raised, and I'd like to separate them if I can. One into the use of the councillor prefix, and secondly, the more democratic issues that he's flagged. The community board has decided that in terms of using the councillor prefix, that we won't be using it. And this is across the board. It's not, there's been some, because of mistake made in the first meeting minutes, there's been a feeling that it's only for town and parish councillors, whereas county councillors get their councillors. None of us get to use our councillor prefixes. And the reason why we've taken that off is we want the community boards to be more than just another meeting of councillors, town and parish and county, and to bring in wider agencies in the community to have an active part within that community board. And I actually felt that Councillor Stutchbury raised why the councillor issue, the prefix, can be a stumbling blocks for that wider engagement. He raised that it would have been rude for me to not stick by the rules of this Buckingham Town Council, which does use the councillor prefix, and we also just heard reference to standing orders. And the truth is, I don't actually fully, I came into this late and I don't fully understand what standing orders are, if I'm truly honest. And perhaps I should, and I apologise that I don't. But also, to the worry that you might be rude when talking to the community board, as was pointed out by Councillor Stutchbury, is off-putting to people who are new to this process. It's really important that the community board is able to provide funding for charities, help groups, community groups, residents associations, churches, as well as the council, town and parish councils and their councillors. And in fact, what worries me is that quite often the status quo is often held by establishment and history and tradition. And actually, I'd like to move past that and try and do something new. And I want that we do that something new so that we can invite more younger members and get more younger people involved in the community board and access to that funding. And that is work that we're doing. Councillor Stutchbury sits on the youth subcommittee, and we're fledgling days, but we do have a clear vision of the work that a community board can do. And that vision is slightly different from the parish and town councils that we want to work with as well. To touch a little bit also on the democratic issues raised by Councillor Cole there, the community board is the voting rights of those for the people that are responsible for the funding. So those are those elected county councillors who have access to over £200,000 worth of funding that we are looking to give to the people we can work with. And so we're looking to give that to applications from the town council, from our parish councils, and from other boards. Now, because that's money coming out of the county council budget, it's appropriate that the county councillors are the ones that vote on giving that money out. However, we have done and always do take indicative votes from anyone who wants to be involved, and that involves parish and town councillors, but also those other members that want to be involved in the community board and are doing great work that aren't elected councillors, but are great community leaders that are important to all of us. So it is different. I am trying to do something new. I am trying to break some traditions, but there is a reason for it. And I think that reason should be given some chance. There is £200,000 worth of funding that the Buckinghamshire Town Council can be actively involved in, whether or not you have a designated representative in Mark Cole. I'm a great fan of Mark Cole's and I'd love him to continue, but I understand that this is his choice. There is also another option, and this is an option that would be available to any committee. If you don't like what the chairman is doing, then it's probably not appropriate to ask another council to write strongly worded messages insisting that that chairman changes his mind. The best way to get a chairman to change his mind is to vote him out. And if I'm wrong, then I think this energy should come in form of Councillor Cole coming and working with others, councillors, and seeing if the chair should stand. I'm very happy that if the community board wants to vote me out, then that's fine, and you can find someone who has a different view on this. However, I don't particularly think it is right that established, old, traditional, venerable, worthy councils like the Buckinghamshire Town Council should be saying, you must not do this. You may think it's right, we think it's wrong. I think that's a dangerous precedent. And so for that reason, I am sticking to my guns. There is a way for you to change it if you think that's the right thing to do. But by voting here now to say that I'm doing the wrong thing, you're making the vote in the wrong board. You should be coming to the community board, working with others. Let's have a vote on it. I'm very happy to do that. But this argument should be had at the community board. I don't want it to look like the Buckinghamshire Town Council is bullying new boards that are trying to do something different by throwing its weight. There's been some very strong language used about this personally, and I'm fine for that. There is a mechanism for changing it. There is a reason why I'm doing it. I have the utmost respect for all of you. I will call you by your councillor roles in this meeting because that's the rules of this meeting, and I'm very happy for that. But I want others who might find that intimidating, and just 4 years ago, that was me, to take a more active role in the community board. I can talk forever. I'm not sure it's for me to answer questions. I'm happy to if you want to. It's really for you to debate, but I'm here if you've got anything further to say.
Okay, Councillor Stutchbury.
Firstly, you premised it was Buckinghamshire County Council. Unfortunately, it's Buckinghamshire Council. Standing orders are what you're given as chairman to steer the meeting and conduct business, and so that you can go back and look at them. The issue of you being voted out is not the issue. There's no mechanism, as I understand, as you were appointed by the cabinet member. So that question isn't a question we should even bother to approach. I feel, Councillor Cllr, that what people are wanting is a recognition of the appointment of the people from the other councils appointed to represent them. What happens through our standing orders is there's a system where the members here discussed and voted not only for the first person, but the second person and the third person to attend. Buckingham Town Council is probably quite traditional and that's never a bad thing. Buckinghamshire County Council was always prided itself to be traditional. The advantage of the title, I think, Councillor Cllr, is that it just delineates where the person comes from. Being John, being Mary, or being Sheila, doesn't really tell anyone in the meeting who you're representing when you vote on something and how you're going to go forward. You stated earlier, quite correctly, that the community board members, being the councillors, were able to allocate money to the COVID emergency fund, which is the right thing to have done. But you use the prefix councillors. So we're councillors when we make decisions about money, but we're not councillors, or no one's councillors within the meeting. There's an inconsistency there, and it's not. I don't believe the council, when I sat on the shadow authority and looked at the scrutiny of it, set out with the intention of not recognising town and parish councils. Even the limited constitution recognises town and parish councils, and I premised earlier, even the emerging parish charter recognises town and parish councils. And that is not to demean anybody else who's on the group, because they will come from an organisation, be Thames Valley Police or the fire service, or representing youth, Action for Youth, or whatever. So everyone has the title. Then you can know who they are, and you know where their interests are when they speak for or against something. At the moment, you don't know that, but the truism is the position of the Buckinghamshire councillors on it and the position of the community board is at odds with good courtesy and probably good manners. So I hope you would agree to go back and ask for a change to that if you say it's council policy, because what will happen now, having once been Mayor of Buckingham and attended civic functions as Mayor of Buckingham, Buckinghamshire Council now will go at the back of the mayoral line, as they're now the newest council in Buckinghamshire. So in importance to the Majesty the Queen, they will not be at the front where they were historically, but they will still be recognised as a council. Traditions are there to help us all. So please reconsider your position, Councillor Charlie Cllr. I don't think it's about you. It's about the title, and it's not about you.
Thank you. Sorry, do you want to reply to that, Charlie, before Councillor Smith speaks?
It would be very kind of you if you wouldn't mind me just responding to one thing. So I use the councillor prefix in this meeting because that is the way this meeting is run, and I'm happy to do that. There was, annoyingly, that wasn't the reason why I had my hand up in the air, and I've totally forgotten why I was, and so I've missed my opportunity, and I'll move on.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just concerned a wee bit with some inconsistencies in what Councillor Cllr said. For example, if you look at item 21 on the agenda, the attachment to that, there are references in there, not the agenda, the minutes, sorry. There are references in there to PC for police constable to identify one of the speakers, and there may be others. I just quickly pulled that one out. What about other titles, you know, the likes of doctors, for example? Are they going to be relegated to just plain Mr. or Mrs. or Ms? I tend to agree very much with most of what Robin has just said, but again, Charlie, we had other agencies regularly at the old local area forums, and as everybody who attended those knows, we all knew who people represented, and we are there attending in a representative role. I refer not just to Councillor Cole, but to to those representing other parish councillors as well. It is right that their position, as Robin has said, should be identified. I really don't know where to go with this. I think I understand the intention to make it all mates together around a table type of approach, but actually it is not quite that. It needs to have some degree of recognition of who people are, where they're from, what they're representing, and that never in LAF days detracted from those who are outside an organisation, putting in requests for money or assistance or support or whatever. And I really don't see how it does with the community board.
Okay, Councillor Cllr.
Thank you, Mike, because actually you've prompted me to remember what my other thing was by bringing up that question. It was exactly the same thing. So yes, it is only the councillor prefix that we're talking about here. And the reason is, one of the things is, from the LAS, for example, you still have to identify which council you represent as a parish councillor or a town councillor. Councillor doesn't actually identify you. It lets people know that you are elected, but it doesn't tell you what body you're representing. So in the LAF, we were all introduced always by the parish or the town council we were remarking, and that continues. We are still being identified by who we're representing. But I don't feel that, I do feel that councillor prefix can be off-putting, that the rules that can come with the formality of these meetings can be a barrier to entry. And it's really important to move away from the LAF and to a community board, which is a new thing. It's not just being maced together, although it is a less formal meeting, but it's about being more open and more encompassing and allowing others to have active, permanent roles in that community board without having to be elected to it. And that's the point. This is not about a board of elected representatives. It's wider than that. And that is why the councillor prefix is something that we're removing. I'm flattered, frankly, that I get to be the un-Tory Tory, that I get to be a Conservative that's doing something that's a little different. I beg your leave to give us some space to continue with that experiment, and let's see if we can do something different. It doesn't, I'm in no way trying to insult anyone, and I think you know that, and you know me.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harvey.
I don't know quite where to start. I could say a lot, but I'm going to try and be very brief. Two things I'd say. Charlie, if you really wanted to make this as some sort of local people's parliament where everybody's equal, you wouldn't retain the power of the Buckinghamshire councillors to spend all the money and decide where it goes, because those two positions are inherently inconsistent, and whatever you say, they will always be inconsistent. And as Robin has pointed out, I think Mike too, there are plenty of other titles knocking around. You know, if Sir Bevel Stanier came along to the meeting, is he going to be referred to as Mr. Stanier? Because that isn't his title, it's Sir Bevel, or even Baronet, or whatever. This is just simply wrong. It feels like a Maoist game. It feels like an episode from Animal Farm. It just is ridiculous. I'm sorry, but it is plain ridiculous. Now, that's your choice. And I do think that in the end, Buckingham Town Council is going to make a decision. Do we want to play this game? Personally, I don't. And I would vote now that we do not send a representative at all along to this committee, or whatever you want to call it. I don't think it's valid. I don't think it's right. I think it's utterly disrespectful, and I think it should end. But if it doesn't end, fine, do what you want, but I don't support us being there at all.
Okay, Councillor Cole. You're still muted.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to take issue with what Councillor Cllr said about these people are clearly identified. Appendix E on tonight's pack is the minutes of the November Buckingham Villages Community Board. and throughout it, it refers to Mr. Cllr, Mr. Cole, Miss Birch, without saying who they are. Mr. T. Cavender gave an update. Mr. D. Jones gave an update. Miss S. Comer gave an update. Nowhere does it identify who these people are. Yet, PC Farrow gets his title, and so does Sergeant Kuttner. They get their titles, yet everybody else at that meeting is unidentified except by being Mr., Mrs. or Miss. So I'm sorry, Charlie, but you've got that one wrong.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rolfe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Smith and Councillor Cole have both mentioned the fact that the police officers' titles were there, and I was going to speak about it earlier. But I was going to ask Councillor Cllr, is this common practice across every local community board across Buckinghamshire?
No, it's a good question. Actually, it was referred to earlier that if this, this being Buckinghamshire policy, it's not Buckinghamshire policy. It is supported by the Buckinghamshire Council, but it is my decision as chair to, and frankly, my decision as chair to have maintained it, having been asked for it, because it's something I believe in. But so it's not a policy. It's sporadic use throughout the county. It's something that I suspect, frankly, I'm quite on my own on, but which is why I'm very happy to have an indicative vote. But it should happen there, not here. I don't want to see the Buckingham Town Council in any way distancing itself from £200,000 worth of funding to support the already. That won't happen from a financial thing. If you decide not to come, you're still welcome to come and work with us in any way you want to. It's not a council policy. It's me as chair. It's something I feel I want to do. I have the county's support for it. I have strong reasons. We've talked in this very council about trying to encourage younger members. This is a significant step, and I'm not saying it's perfect, that we haven't got things to improve on, and I'm listening to suggestions, but it is something that I think really could help engage other people who are new to this forum and might bring a new demographic and also some new perspectives and skills. It's not, it's the holy grail of this kind of governance, is to bring in a wider range of people from different age groups, and we're all keen to do it. It's wrong that in my mid-40s I keep on looking like I'm young. So let's try something different and new. And I'm not a very traditional person, and I don't think I need to apologise for that. I get the importance of it within this forum. This is just one forum where we're going to try and dispense with that tradition and formality. It in no way stops it happening where else other people will want it.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Firstly, I thank Councillor Chair for his integrity of his position and the fact that he feels attached to that position and willing to defend it. And that's, whether we agree with that or don't agree with that, that's to be respected, that he's strong enough to defend his position. Noting the comments made, and I don't believe it's about the office. I'm not a very traditional sort of bloke. Anyone looks at me would probably presume I wasn't. But I have to respect people who have traditions. So I'd like to propose a compromise, Charlie, which you could consider. That to settle it, have an indicative vote on whether the members at the next community board wish to be addressed as Mr. and Mrs. or as the person they represent. And then can we be bound by that decision? And that would be an indicative vote of the community board. And would you be willing to adopt that view if it was different to yours? And I would be willing to adopt the view if it was different to the view being expressed tonight. Would you see that as a reasonable way forward to settle this, rather than turn it into a disagreement with you? Because much of what you're trying to achieve in an evolving situation, I serve on 2 subcommittees on it and I tend it. Everyone's trying to do something positive, and it's far too early to judge how that's going to turn out. would you agree that's a reasonable approach? Let the indicative vote of the meeting decide the way forward. And if the minority is 1 or the minority is 2 opinion, we both and everybody is bound by that decision.
Yeah, it's exactly what I was suggesting. My point is, what I think is worrying, and I don't want to happen, is that the Buckingham Town Council takes a position that is effectively bullying another thing. I'm very happy for this to be decided within the community board, and for there to be a vote, and for us to go with what people want to do within the community board. I have no problem with that, and you know what, I say that without being remotely confident I'll win it. So I'm very, very happy to go forward with that. I'm not sure the Buckingham Town Council wants to be taking a strong position on it.
Well, as the situation stands, Charlie, Buckingham Town Council will only have 1 representative on the community board, and every other parish and organisation has a representative. So if it's on the agenda, there can't be a bullying nature in that. It will be a discussion about the way forward, which will be decided by the community board, where it should be decided by the members of the board on which way they feel most comfortable proceeding. And if you're happy to do that, absolutely, that shows a single sense of purpose. And will that be on the next agenda? Thank you.
Yeah, no, happy. Honestly, Robin, very, very happy. We should do this together more.
Councillor Harvey.
Can I just point out the irony that somehow it's okay for the community board in this neck of the woods to do something different to the rest of the county, but when it comes to parking, we have to conform with the rest of the county. It's kind of ironic that one thing that would benefit a lot of local people is not allowed because it can't be county-wide, or it would have to be county-wide, but something that actually is on a point of principle for this town council is allowed, even though it's not county-wide. For me, there's a deep irony there.
Okay,
well, sorry, Jen. Right. It would be very worrying if not being able to do something because it's county. It'd be more worrying if there weren't more opportunities when the community board could do something different. The whole point of the community board is to give representation to the local community and the northern most, for us, one of the most northern parts of Buckinghamshire, to be able to make decisions on local funding to go where we want it to go. It is a shame that on that particular instance, it was directly against a policy that we couldn't shove. But let's not talk about parking. I think we're loosely in agreement on that.
We've done that.
Yeah.
Councillor Newell.
Yeah, I just wanted to be supportive to what Robin was suggested, but also to say I think it's really important that we're part of it, whether or not the title councillor is used. I'm not precious about it myself, and I think it would be a great shame if we opted out of it for any reason. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can we leave that there? We'll leave that with Charlie and the community board to have their vote on that.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Reinstate, sorry.
Reinstate standing orders, yeah. Okay. Have we reinstated standing orders? And then we can move on to item 60.
Well, Chairman, just to make some commentary on once you've removed your reinstated standing orders, are we, the Buckingham Town Council members, noting that the agreement is that there'll be an indicative vote of the community board on titles? I think having asked for it, and I believe we got an agreement by it, I think would be very anti-democratic if we then went against the indicative vote of the community board members, of which we don't know everybody else's mind. We agree that we would be bound by that, because let's not then, if that vote went down, go back and say, well, it wasn't the vote we wanted, so we're going to have another vote to get the vote we want. I think we have to agree that we would be bound by that. So can I propose that we are?
Okay.
I'll second that.
Ruth seconded that.
Yeah.
Is everybody in favour of that approach? All those in favour?
May I speak, Madam Chairman?
Yeah, sorry, Mark, did you want to speak?
I wanted to speak, yeah.
Yeah.
This item was put on the agenda tonight at my request prior to a further discussion at the next full council meeting when we're going to be considering the parish charter. So I think we're jumping the gun a bit at the moment. I don't think, as it stands here, we can make any motions or recommendations. This is preparatory to going to the next full council meeting, where we will be discussing parish charter, and that was my advice from the town clerk.
But through you, Madam Mayor, the item we discussed was to do with the parish charter is a separate item, and this was to do with that. And I felt that morally and intellectually we had to have a vote amongst ourselves on that after getting a compromise position from the chair of the community board. So it was seconded. We could propose it and vote against it. What we can't do is talk it down and forget it didn't happen. So can we go back to the vote for you, Madam Mayor, on the, if that vote is, we'll be bound by the vote of the majority of that meeting.
Okay.
Sorry, point of order, Madam Chair. I don't think it's a motion that can be raised from the floor. There's not
seconded. I don't think it can be raised either.
Yeah.
Well, there was me thinking you were all reasonable blokes and ladies. I was being progressive, and it's been seconded. So I would ask the town clerk for her ruling on whether we can actually propose and second something, because we're sort of making it up on the hoof, and I don't think that shows us in a good light. Actually weakens our position and our argument. Period. So I'm happy to be proved wrong by the legal officer of the council. What I'm not happy to be proved wrong by a collection of people who aren't willing to compromise.
Okay, let's go over to Paul.
So my take would be the agenda item says that the item is to review the town council's representation at the board in light of Buckinghamshire Council's insistence on not allowing town councils to be called by their title of councillor. So because the item is to review, that does imply that there would be a discussion and potential decisions related to the item. So I would suggest that if a motion is related clearly to the item on the agenda and fits with that discussion, members would have had the chance before the meeting to consider their views on that subject, and the motion doesn't drop anything dramatically new into the situation. But it's for members to decide. If members are uncomfortable, obviously members wouldn't vote anyway.
Well, thank you, town clerk. You've just reassured me of what I thought. We had a discussion about what were standing orders at the start of it. You've reassured me that what standing orders are. I propose we move to the vote. The vote was interrupted in its part way through it being carried, with people saying, I don't think we ought to do that. Now, the way to defeat a vote is to vote against it and to or put an amendment. No amendment was put. My proposal was seconded. So I propose we move to the vote. If the vote's defeated, you can then move to the next thing, because there's been no amendment put before the vote was put. So I propose through our standing orders, we move to the vote on that we will accept that ruling of the community board.
Councillor Smith, Councillor Smith had his hand up.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, on a point of order, Robin's asked to go to the vote. You put that question to everybody first.
Excuse me, but Councillor Smith had his hand up before that.
No, this is point of order. I'm allowed to interrupt. This is standing orders. Robin's asked to move to the vote. At that point, you have to say, do we want to move to the vote? And you have a vote of councillors whether or not we go to the vote. That's the standing orders.
Yeah, but Councillor
It's a
Smith
point
is
of order
also
interruption. It overrides everything else. Robin has asked to go to the vote. Therefore, you have to ask everybody else, do we want to go to the vote? You have to do that now.
Yeah, Councillor Smith has also raised a point of order.
For which he can be heard first.
Yes.
No.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just a wee bit concerned, and perhaps the town clerk could advise. We're being asked, Robin is asking us to agree to accept the decision from a motion which appears is going to appear at the community board, but we don't know the words of that motion yet. Until we know the form of that motion, we're not in a position to agree whether or not to support it. What are your views on that, Paul?
I would say that's a very valid point, actually. because the Councillor Stutchbury's motion it is indeed reliant upon a future motion which we don't have the word in front of us to, and obviously we can't define now what that motion would be. In that context, the wisest thing to do would be to leave this until interim council, when it would be clear what we're voting on, because it's clear that some members are uncomfortable that whether we should be voting on the motion at all. And as Councillor Smith points out, actually we're not the motion relies on information that we don't have.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Can I, through you, Madam Mayor, so is the town clerk suggesting, as our legal officer, that this will appear with the relevant motion which is going to go to the community board on the interim town council, Councillor Smith's advice, who's a very diligent councillor about detail and procedures and standing orders, that will appear so that members will have all the information in front of them, and at that point we can decide our position at that point. Is that what we're saying? Because if that's what we're saying, I will happily accept that because it's the advice of the town clerk.
That's what I'm understanding. Yes,
yeah.
Paul?
Yes.
In which case we don't need to go to an indicative vote, because between the chair of resources and the town clerk, we've been advised correctly.
Absolutely. Okay, so that is what we shall do. Okay.
Thank you.
Right, we shall move on to item 16, which is the annual town meeting.
Chair, may I make a couple of points at the start of this item?
Yeah.
One is that, having sent the report, I have spoken to a number of other councils who this year, an election year, would normally make an arrangement for their annual town meeting to take place after the election, so in the last couple of weeks of May, which would be in order and avoids a town meeting becoming effectively an election related event that then becomes an opportunity for new councillors to engage with the community and talk to them. So that would be possible, which isn't quite what the report says. And also to remind members that the town council is not legally obliged to run the annual town meeting. So even though legislation says in normal circumstances an annual town meeting should happen, there's nothing in law which says it's the town council's job to run the annual town meeting. So if we choose not to, that's absolutely fine under any circumstances.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
So what you're suggesting is to put the tradition away, or suggesting the tradition that we always held the annual town meeting in the way, in the manner that we have done in the limited amount of time I've been a member of the town council, to make it a meeting about post-elected members, and not, as every other local authority does in the land, allow the councillors who are currently in a position to explain their position to the electorate, which they have the advantage of doing because they are presently elected. You'll put in the most, you'd rather the new councillors explain the position of the council to the public rather than the present councillors. Which, does that suggest you don't trust the present councillors, or is that you're trying to be new and innovative and imaginative in the way that we do things? I'm sure you trust the present councillors. I was being facetious, but I can't see why we would change tradition, apart from the impracticality of it, that COVID limits the chairman to be able to express their interests and the council to actually hold the meeting. The only reason I would suggest delaying it is for health and safety reasons and COVID and whatever, because if we had a public meeting on Teams, Zoom, Microsoft Meet, whole sections of the public wouldn't be able to take part in it, and that isn't a public meeting, that's a private gathering on an internet site. So I think if that was the reason, I could understand it, but that wasn't what I heard.
Can I just be really clear? I'm not suggesting that we do that. I'm informing members that is another option, that you could do it at the end of May, you could do it in March. I'd suggest that in terms of health and safety and COVID, it's very unlikely you could do a physical meeting at either of those points anyway. It has to be done by if it's going to happen, it has to be done by the 1st of June, because that's what the legislation sets. So members' choices are, do you want to do it If so, do you want to do it in March or the end of May? And obviously, if you're doing it, then it will be online, and what are your views on how that happens?
Okay, Councillor Gately.
Thank you. I can see advantages to each of these options. I do think the COVID situation does make any meeting problematic, although we do seem to have had more members of the public attending our Zoom meetings than we used to when we were in the council chamber. So that could indicate that we could get a good turnout to an online annual town meeting. I can see the advantage of postponing it to May because COVID situation could have improved by then, and also making the new council and new councillors more well known could be a real benefit. So I'm a bit on the fence with this, but I think it could have some advantages to postponing it till May.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing I was going to say was I have heard rumours, and maybe that can be clarified this evening, that the elections could be further delayed, possibly till the autumn. And obviously then any of those options, it becomes very different. If we then went for the May meeting, it would still be this council rather than the new council. But that, I think, is still unclear.
Through you, Mayor, the only thing I know about the elections is if you look at the budget scrutiny, they budgeted for money to October in theoretically in their discussions at Buckinghamshire Council. They've also put a figure in there for a year. So, but there's been no decision, to my knowledge, on the election.
Sorry, yeah, Councillor Mordew.
Having been involved in 3 days of scrutiny of the budgets, yes, the money is in there, but that's a pragmatic reason for putting the money in. The actual decision whether to hold an election or not is not of Buckinghamshire's choice. It's the government's choice. And the moment the government has quite clearly indicated they wish to go ahead with a May election, there's a lot of people who are not very happy with that decision and feel it's best postponed probably until the autumn. But nobody knows yet, apart from probably the Prime Minister. And yeah, I won't laugh.
No, nobody knows.
Will you allow the rest of us to laugh?
It's a free country, Robin. You know, we see so many. Well, I'll leave it at the fact that at this moment in time, the government, well, I'll put that in brackets, says that we should have an election in May. Although I know that the council and other councils and the local government association is not very happy about it, because one of the problems is getting enough people to do the counting and to man the polling stations and hand in equipment. These venues have to be booked well in advance. You can't just turn up and decide to hold an election.
And most of the venues at the moment are over to vaccinations. Councillor Smith.
I'm tending towards being in favour of deferring the annual town meeting until later in May, mainly because of the COVID situation. You know, regardless of decisions which are outside our control, I still think it would be a good idea to hold it then, simply because of the COVID restrictions. Hopefully venues might be available if we could hold an attended meeting, but if we can't hold an attended meeting, it gives us a little bit more time to plan up doing the virtual type approach. I do favour shifting it out a bit.
Okay, anybody else got any views on that? Councillor Stutchbury?
I think Councillor Smith, as usual, the sense of the pragmatic thing is that apart from if we did it online, it would fill us our moral responsibility to account for our work. The likelihood, I would imagine, the likelihood is that the practicality is as all the vaccination sites are being polling stations, unless we're going to get vaccinated and vote all at the same time, which is an attractive thing. The turnout will be higher. If we have vaccination and voting, I think the turnout will be magnificent for that election, but that isn't going to happen. I think Councillor Smith, the idea of delay it, much as I resent delaying it, is probably the sensible position to go for.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Okay, so
Councillor Hirons.
Councillor Hirons.
Yes, I'd agree with that. I think really the more we can delay it legally, the more chance we have of it actually happening. And even for May, I suspect it won't happen then, because after all, even though it's the law, the government can change that pretty damn quick. And I suspect we'll end up probably in the autumn, like Councillor Smith said.
As long as they don't appoint the councils, we'll be all right, won't we?
Yeah. Okay, is everybody happy with that? Yes?
Yeah.
Councillor Harvey, yes? That was a thumbs up, yeah. Okay, thank you. So we shall table it for May and see what happens in between times to see if any other further information comes out there. Yes? Okay, so she'll move on to item 17, which is the draft Buckinghamshire Town and Parish Council Charter.
Thank you, Mayor. If I may, this is just to clarify, the recommendation here is that we establish a working group to discuss the charter. The link I gave you to the charter wasn't necessarily the final version, which is why I didn't include it with the papers. So it's not a recommendation that we get into the details of the charter here, but that we set up a working group and to report back to interim.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stuchbury.
It just looked like a rough outline of a charter or lots of words in there. I think it's interesting that in my correspondence that it was one organisation and professional town clerks who met to get to the consultation stage of this. This is the consultation on the charter, and I think it's important that a working group does look at it, noting that our experience of the Buckinghamshire Constitution, how favourable it's been to parishes and how democratic it has not represented their interests. So I think we need to look at it, because we can't allow it to go forward unamended, unchanged and unimproved. So I think that's the right thing to do, but to agree people tonight for a subgroup is the wrong way of doing it. I think a criteria of what the group's objectives are should be sent out, and then councillors can sign on to those objectives, which I would imagine would be to review it and come up with recommendations on how to improve it, because I don't think you could accept it as it is.
No, absolutely. Councillor Smith.
Yes, I certainly think it needs a small group to run through it with a fine-tooth comb. There's a lot of strange things in there, to say the very least, and a small working group working to a fairly tight timetable, although the consultation period may be extended, but it is a fairly tight timescale. So I support the recommendation wholeheartedly.
Okay, is everybody agreed with that?
Yep.
Councillor Cole, yes? Yeah. Terry, did you want to speak, or were you agreeing? Yeah, he was just agreeing. That's okay. Okay, so we'll have something set out for Paul to send round to the councillors, and then go from there to set up a group.
Well, I think we could do that now, couldn't we?
Yeah, can we do that now?
Well, I would suggest Councillor Cole be a member.
Good.
How many are you going to have? How many do you want?
How many does who want?
Yeah.
Well, for this to set up a work group, how many?
Would be enough, surely.
Hmm?
I think 4 would be enough, Chairman.
I tend to agree with Terry. 4 would be.
And I'd like. Sorry, Mike. I'd like to propose Councillor Ralph as one.
He's muted at the moment.
Oh, is he?
He's still here though, can't he?
Anthony, you're muted.
Sir Ralph.
I hadn't muted my ears. I wonder whether people with perhaps a little more experience might be appropriate.
Oh no, I disagree with that, Anthony, because you get experience by being with experienced people.
You're such a smooth talking devil, aren't you, Councillor Bloomfield?
Councillor Cole.
May I suggest Councillor Smith in return?
I support that.
Councillor Smith, are you happy to do that?
I will if my arm is severely twisted, but given that this is going to be my last council term, whenever it might end, I think it would be preferable. I think it would be preferable to have councillors who are going to go beyond, or intend, or want to go beyond that term, because it's going to shape it could well shape the relationship between the unitary authority and town councils, the larger parish councils. So the answer is only if nobody else wants to come forward.
Okay. Does anybody else want to come forward?
May I propose
Yes.
Councillor Collins, Patrick Collins? Heidi?
He's watching the football.
He's watching the football, I think.
He can't, it's not on. Councillor Collins, where are you?
But if he's not present, is he?
Where's he gone?
Well, you can't go and round him up. He isn't
No.
present in the meeting. That's very wrong. You couldn't go
Anybody
down
else?
the street and pick him out of the local hostelry. If he appears, that's fine.
I had a
He
low
appears.
battery on this thing, if you really want to know, Robin.
What?
I have to plug the thing in. The battery is running low. What's the
Well, that's good.
question?
But you would, if you want to do something, you should at least should be present in the meeting, wouldn't you, Councillor Collins?
I have been present in the meeting. What do you think I've been doing?
I don't know.
Can we move on? The question was, who wants to be involved in this work group? And Councillor Christine String-Clark has a hand up there.
I don't want to be.
Could I please propose, if she's willing, that Councillor Margaret Gately would be an excellent person.
Councillor Gately?
I'll second that.
Thank you for your confidence there. Yes, I'd be happy to be part of the group. I mean, a bit like Anthony, though. I may not. I'm only a co-opted member, even though this co-option seems to be going on, and maybe. But yeah,
Precisely.
I think it's probably quite good to have a balance between the more experienced councillors
absolutely
and the newer ones.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
4 then, haven't we?
So we've got Councillor Cole, Councillor Gately,
Councillor Ralph.
Councillor Ralph. Did you say yes, Anthony?
Yeah, I did.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
And one more.
Councillor Smith, because he's had his arm twisted.
Because he's had his arm twisted.
Councillor Smith.
Yeah.
I second that.
Perhaps Robin will be Mike's apprentice.
I've only an apprentice once in my life, and they all that was in the agriculture.
Could I further suggest that that Paul perhaps divvy up the draft into 4 sections, and we each have a look at the sections allocated to us in the first instance? That, I think, would save a bit of time.
Yeah.
Good idea, Mike.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that right, Paul?
Yeah, I will do that.
Lovely.
I think that's great. That's a good team of councillors there.
That is.
Can we write to just to find the time frame that we're working for the consultation, and I'm presuming that the parish charter is not going to appear on an agenda after it's been consulted and not before it's consulted. I hope that's the case. So I think we need to find the time frame that you're working to, because it will come back to council, because it might not be depending on the election within the term of this authority or the new authority of Buckinghamshire Council, which does make a difference, just to make sure what we're working to.
Okay, Councillor Bloomfield.
Yes, well, the town clerk can discuss with the 4 members about a time frame and bring it back as soon as they can.
Okay, Councillor Cole.
The town clerk's report quite clearly says on the 2.4 that the town council will agree a final response to the interim council on 22nd of February. It's all there.
Yeah.
Yeah, well said, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. We're clear on that. We shall move on to item 18, which is the external audit report and certificate.
Thank you, Chair. So again, this is an item which has been discussed by resources but needs to come to full council and be minuted as having been received by full council. For those members who weren't at resources, the external audit report for 1920 has one exception item, which is highly frustrating and disappointing. The item arises because you may remember that we changed our policy with assets last year to only include assets over £500 in the asset list, whereas we used to have all assets, which doesn't make sense. In the wording of the report, it says that you should restate the prior year figure, which I took to mean you should repeat the figure as it was previously put, but it actually means you need to change the figure. So what you should do is change the figure in from the year before to be calculated using the same process as the figure for this year, so that people looking at the accounts can understand what the change is between the 2 years. So that's not what I did. And so that's the reason the exception is there. It was very clear on the accounts and on the audit report we sent off that that's what had happened. And I explained in the wording that we'd changed the policy and that's why the difference was there. So there was no doubt that anybody could have misunderstood what had happened, but technically the number is wrong. So that's why the exception is there.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that's all noted.
Yeah.
Again, Chair.
Chairman, I was going to say something on that, but you said that.
Councillor Smith was speaking there.
I think we not only need to receive it, but to accept it as well.
Yeah.
And the explanation that Paul's just given as
Okay.
a full council.
Absolutely. So is everybody happy with the explanation and accepting that? Yes?
Well, can I just point of principle, Chairman? I think the explanation is very honourable of the town clerk, but the advice, unless he corrects me differently, that we were being given to prepare those accounts was given by our previous internal auditor, and he was acting on the advice of the internal auditor when he put those figures in there. We have a council have changed our internal auditor since then. So though he's being very gentlemanly, like taking one for the troops, he is not 100% responsible because he takes his advice from what was our internal auditor. So I don't think we should just note it. We should note that as well. If I'm incorrect, the town clerk will correct me. He's too much of a gentleman to have said that.
That is correct. The internal auditor, we did discuss it with him, and he approved the version we sent out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I was doing that, I was protecting your honour, sir.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. So are we all accepting that report? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, we shall move on to item 19, the Unitary Council.
Thank you, Chair. So just to note, this is another standing item. As you're aware, we're seeking to negotiate with Buckinghamshire Council to take on additional assets and services. We've been selected as one of the 15 pilots in the county. The officer working on that has changed, and I have my first meeting with the new officer this week. So hopefully the next time this is on the agenda, I'll have a more detailed update to bring you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Item 20 is the representation on the Buckinghamshire Almshouse General Charities, as Councillor Bloomfield, whose term has ended and he doesn't wish to stand again. So is there anyone else that would wish to join there? Councillor Newell?
I'd like to nominate Councillor Anthony Ralph.
Okay, he's muted at the moment.
Any
other recommendations?
Councillor Stutchby has hand.
Councillor Stutchby had your hand up.
I would firstly like to thank Councillor Bloomfield for his time of service of office on there, and thank you, have it minuted, that we're grateful for the work he put into it. And I would like to second Councillor Ruth Knowles' proposal that Anthony Ralph, if he's willing to accept it, would go forward. But I think it's important that we thank Councillor Terry Bloomfield for his work as well.
It is. He's done a lot of hard work. Thank you, Terry. And would Councillor Anthony Ralph wish to accept that?
Yes, I would.
Lovely. Thank you. Okay, so we shall be in touch with the dates of the next meetings and such. Okay.
We probably need to just formally agree it.
Yes. Everybody in agreement with that? There's no other recommendations? Lovely.
Yeah, that's unanimous.
Thank you. Okay. Welcome.
Well, you're not in that meeting at the moment.
No, I know. So item 21 are the reports from representatives on outside bodies. So we've got to note the report from the Rural Market Town Group, and which is Appendix D, and Buckingham and Villagers Community Board, which is Appendix E. Councillor Mark Cole? Yes,
May I ask that the council note regarding Appendix E, which is the Buckingham Villagers Community Board, that despite Councillor Cllr's assurances earlier this evening, the vast majority of those attending are not identified as whom they represent. So in years to come, nobody will have a clue who or what T. Carriger, D. Jones or P. Wright.
As soon as my...
So if we could put that down as a matter of record, because I think this is going to come back and bite at some stage.
Okay, thank you. Okay, is there anyone else wishing to? Sorry, Councillor Stutchbury.
Someone else.
Yes, Robin, you're muted.
No.
No, shut up, Terry. Be quiet. No, you'll enjoy yourself tonight at my expense. I love you for it. Though the thing we have to recognise with that, and I think it's something we need to establish, is the one it was touched on tonight, the way that the funding is agreed, and the way that free councillors by email can agree chunks of money. I think that's something that we need to take to the community board at some point and get clarity on, because I get emails and I haven't got an audit trail for where it's gone, and I have risen this with the Section 51 officer personally. I can't really do a proper audit trail, and on Wednesday I'll be sat in an audit committee meeting where I'm supposed to do an audit trail. So there's lots of things about the enthusiasm of this thing, but there's a lot of ground to learn, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Rolfe.
Can I ask through the chair to Councillor Stutchbury? We touched when Councillor Cllr was on, and I asked him if it was a normal practice not to use titles across Buckinghamshire with the other authorities. Is this the same situation? Is this a different way of handling payments and perhaps not having a very strong audit trail, just the same in other community boards?
Councillor Mordew?
It's not. It wasn't him. He was asking a question of.
All right.
It might have been a Freudian.
No, I wasn't asking a question. I was going to reply.
He was going to give an answer.
It is standard practice that the only people who can vote on the spending of the money are elected councillors, and that's regardless of which community board it is.
Yeah.
What you asked me the question, Councillor Ralph, and what Councillor Howard Mordew said is correct. What I am worried about is the influence and the way through COVID and whatever we've been able to sign off chunks of money, and the governance and overview scrutiny of that is very much within the control of people. You can imagine that if three people are very much in favour of something, as was told us by the chairman, he was not incorrect, that can get chunks of money. As a long-standing elected member, that does seem different. It may be innovative, it may be the new world, and it may be the way they want to do it. But I think at some point that's got to go to the Buckinghamshire Council's own internal auditors to audit how that money was spent. And I'm not entirely sure, to advise differently from the Section 51 officer, that there's an audit trail robust enough to settle somebody in what I've seen. I could be proved wrong, but I've asked the professional, the Section 51 officer, to come back to me with an explanation whether he's content that the audit trail is sufficient enough. And that's where I was going to go. I mean, I could be worrying about nothing, as I said to him, but if I'm worried about nothing, tell me I'm worrying about nothing, because I have a responsibility to the audit committee and I should be ever present to raise those things.
Okay, Councillor Smith.
Well, I think Councillor Stutchbury has answered his own question, hasn't he?
Yeah.
He's referred the question of whether or not there was a sufficiently robust audit trail to an appropriate officer within that authority. I think we simply let that take its course.
Yeah. Okay, everybody happy with that? Yes. Okay, item 22 are just to receive the list of events attended by the Mayor and Deputy Mayor. This hasn't been that many. Item 23, Chair's announcements. I'm just really happy and pleased to see all the vaccinations going ahead, and they are doing a terrific job down there.
Yes.
And long may it continue, and just you know, hope people remember that even though they've had their first vaccine, they're not immune yet. It does take 2 or 3 weeks to kick in, and they've still got to stay safe and stay isolated and use their masks and everything else.
It takes 3 weeks after the second vaccination, really, doesn't it?
You get some immunity after the first.
So yeah, you can still pass it on though.
You still pass it on. You still got to be very,
73%
very careful. But they are doing a tremendous job down there. Yeah, and all the volunteers. It's all.
And you can still pass it on several weeks later, a month later as well. It doesn't prevent you getting the disease. You can still get it, but with milder symptoms.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
People don't know that.
Yeah. Okay, that's all. Sorry, Councillor Stutchbury's got his hand up again.
There is a root point here, which is very worrying about this vaccine. I'm really, really grateful for everyone who's doing it. The impression being given is that we vaccinated in the country X amount of people. I'm not a clinician. I'm not a medical scientist, but I used to use vaccines in my professional job on a regular basis in agriculture, and you do not get the full immunity of any vaccine you've given till the second dose in most cases, and as been indicated. So what worries me, if the influence nationally is being born, that the vaccination has been completed, which it hasn't till the second dose is done. So it's, and we may be getting the first dose out there, but let's start really celebrating when people get their second dose.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll send you some information, Robin.
I don't think I'll be getting it very quick.
And then we'll ask you questions, Robin.
Okay.
You'd need
Moving
more.
on. The date of our next meeting is the Interim Council on Monday, the 22nd of February, preceded by an informal meeting, and the full council on Monday, the 15th of March. So thank you, everybody, for your patience tonight.
Thank you, Chair.